All right, let's talk about something that's so often misunderstood: eating and body dysmorphic disorders. And I think the most important thing to get right from the very beginning is this: these are not choices. They are serious, complex psychological illnesses. They have these profound and sometimes, truly devastating effects on both the mind and the body.
When she looked in the mirror, she still saw a chubby girl. This quote, it just gets right to the heart of the issue, doesn't it? It's about this profound disconnect between what is real and what a person sees. And it's inside that distortion that's where our whole exploration really begins.
To really get a handle on how this plays out in someone's life, we're going to follow the journey of a 15-year-old girl named Lauren. Her story is it's such a powerful example of how a very human desire for control can spiral into a life-threatening illness.
Lauren's story just shows how incredibly fast things can escalate. It all started with something a lot of us can relate to: feeling insecure at a new school. So, to get a sense of control, she turned to dieting. But that need for control, it quickly became an obsession. Her diet got dangerously restrictive, and even as her body was literally failing, her hair falling out, her skin growing dry, that distorted perception we just talked about, it told her she was still overweight. And where did the spiral end? A heart attack, at just 82 pounds.
Lauren's story is so personal, but it's also tragically common. It really drives home the fact that this is not a lifestyle choice. It's a disorder of the mind. And to understand just how big this problem is, we need to look at the numbers, because eating disorders, they're among the deadliest psychological conditions we know of. 42%. I mean, just let that sink in for a second. That's the percentage of girls in 1st to 3rd grade, little kids, who already want to be thinner. It's just a shocking statistic that shows you how early this cultural pressure starts.
And that fear, well, it only gets worse. By the time they're 10 years old, a staggering 81% of kids are afraid of being fat. This isn't some fringe issue. It has become a widespread, tragically normalized fear for an entire generation.
And all this early anxiety, it can grow into something much, much more serious. We're talking about an estimated 30 million Americans, that's 20 million women and 10 million men, who have suffered from a clinically significant eating disorder at some point. The scale of this is just massive.
So this is the core message, right here. What we're talking about isn't vanity or some fad diet gone wrong. These are severe psychological illnesses, and they have devastating and sometimes fatal consequences.
So what do these illnesses actually look like? The term eating disorder is kind of an umbrella for a range of conditions. So let's break down the main clinical categories to really understand what's going on.
Okay, so right off the bat, we see the two most well-known disorders. And the key difference here, the thing that often separates them, is body weight. With anorexia, the defining feature is being significantly underweight. But with bulimia, people often maintain a normal body weight, which can make the disorder really hard to spot from the outside.
First up, anorexia nervosa. This is what Lauren was diagnosed with. The core of it is maintaining an abnormally low body weight, and it's all driven by this intense fear of gaining weight and that same distorted body image. And it's not always just about restriction, it can also involve a cycle of binging and purging too.
And the physical consequences, they're brutal. The body is starved of nutrients, so basically begins to shut down. The heart rate slows way down. Bones lose their density, muscles just waste away. This is exactly why anorexia has one of the highest mortality rates of any psychiatric disorder. People can die as a direct result of all this physiological damage.
Next up is bulimia nervosa. The key word here is cycle. It's this destructive pattern of binging on huge amounts of food, followed by what are called compensatory behaviors, like purging, to try and undo it. And even though someone with bulimia might not be underweight, this cycle just wreaks havoc on the inside, causing severe damage to the digestive system, the heart, and even the teeth.
And then there's a third, distinct category: binge eating disorder. It involves that same out-of-control binging you see in bulimia, and it's followed by these intense feelings of guilt and distress. But here's the key difference: there's no purging. The cycle stops after the binge, but that psychological distress is still very, very real.
Finally, there's body dysmorphic disorder, or BDD. Now, this isn't strictly an eating disorder, but it's absolutely in the same family. It's an obsessive preoccupation with the perceived physical flaw, a flaw that to other people might be minor or not even there. It actually shares a lot of features with OCD, involving compulsive behaviors like checking the mirror constantly, and it can cause just immense emotional pain.
So, the obvious question, right? Where does all of this come from? And the answer is, well, it's complicated. There's no single cause.
It's more like a complex web of cultural, biological, and environmental factors all tangled up together.
Yeah, there's really no single villain here. It's an interplay of a whole bunch of factors. Culture plays a huge role. I mean, just think of the media images we're all bombarded with every single day. But so does our biology. Genetics and neurological factors, like how our brains regulate serotonin and dopamine, they're a big piece of the puzzle too. And finally, our immediate environment, our family, our friends, that can have a really powerful influence.
Let's dig into this perfect storm a little bit. Psychologically, you often see feelings of low self-worth and this intense need to be perfect. Culturally, we're surrounded by these ideal standards that basically equate being thin with being successful and beautiful. And then, biologically, some people's brain chemistry can actually reinforce behaviors like binging, making it feel almost like an addiction. When all these things come together, they can create the perfect breeding ground for a disorder to take root.
Okay, after exploring all the causes and the devastating effects, it is so important that we end on a note of hope. So let's go back to Lauren's story, because it's a powerful reminder that even from the absolute lowest point, recovery and healing are possible. They're absolutely possible.
Lauren's path to recovery was structured and it was intensive. It had to be. It started with just medical stabilization, literally letting her body heal. But the real work, the core of it, was psychological. Therapy, support groups, all to address the underlying mental disorder. And slowly, she began to reintroduce food. Her journey wasn't quick. It took 8 months in the hospital. But with dedicated support, she got there.
The key takeaway here is that as serious and as deadly as these illnesses are, they are not a life sentence. They are treatable. And maybe most importantly, they might even be preventable, which forces us to look back at those root causes and think about how we might tackle them before they ever take hold.
And this leads us to one last crucial question. If we know for a fact that culture is a major piece of this puzzle, doesn't that mean we all have a role to play in the solution? It suggests that by consciously changing the messages we send and the messages we accept about bodies and worth and beauty, we can all be part of the cure.